Okay, so hi everyone. This is my presentation on if Taylor Swift can power London. I'm a senior engineer at Synergy Environ. I will tell you a bit more about who Synergy Environ are, but for now we're going to go into the fun stuff, which is how can Taylor Swift power London. So the eagle-eyed amongst you will realise that is not Taylor Swift. That is in fact Shania Twain. And Shania Twain is a love of mine, and the idea for this first came to me when watching Shania Twain at the O2 Arena. And I'll go into what the idea is in a moment, but first off, it's going to be centred around waste heat. So waste heat as a whole, in London, the Tube loses 500 gigawatt hours of heat every year. The UK, through industrial processes, loses almost 400,000 gigawatt hours of heat. And if we took all the heat in the UK that's not being used and it's just being emitted out into the world, we could supply 14% of our homes with heating and hot water. So the question is why are we not using it? But as promised, who are we? Synergy Environ. So we are one of the subsidiaries of PD&MS. We do emissions reporting, baselining, energy strategy, district energy networks, lots of fun stuff. And on the subject of energy networks, it's one of the reasons why I chose to use Taylor Swift over Shania Twain. While I think Shania Twain's the greatest, she's only bringing in 20,000 to her concerts. Taylor Swift is bringing in 90,000. So it's an energy we could harness. So the idea, O2 Arena, a closed roof venue, and it gets very, very hot during performances. So they have to use AC to combat the heat. So why, instead of using AC to get rid of the heat, why don't we use something called ambient heat loop technology that can take the heat and move it away? So we're not having to use air conditioning and extra energy. So what is an ambient heat loop? So an ambient heat loop is essentially just a shared network of heats. It allows low temperature buildings to be connected to high temperature buildings. So here we've got a building that's too hot. So let's say they're in an area of loads of solar glare, loads of sun going down, it's bloody boiling and they're sick of it. So instead of putting on the AC, the house that's over here that's too cold, that might be overgrown with plants, in an area of shade, they don't need to put their heating on. They can just take the too hot heat and move it along. There's two extra parts to this, is you've got a ground source heat pump exchanger and a pump. You need to have pumps to move fluid around a network. If you don't have that, then the fluid's not going to move. So that is an extra energy consumption. And then ground source heat exchangers, this is if you want it to be a space heat as opposed to hot water and washing your hands. But we're going to go into that later. So how much heat can Taylor Swift create? So we're going to go for Wembley, that's where she performs. We need to build a roof, because if we don't have a roof, the heat's going to escape. So we built a roof for this scenario. So she's got 90,000 people attending, and her concerts are 3 hours and 15 minutes long. Now, as a human being, when I'm going on a gentle walk, the heat I emit as a person is 200 watts per metre squared. I've gone for a gentle walk because I think it could be higher if I'm dancing, but some of her music is more sit down. So it's a happy medium. And then the human body's surface area is 1.8 metres squared. So just by going on a walk, I emit 360 watts of heat. So the total heat generated from the crowd is 360 watts times 90,000 people times 3.25, because the 3 hours and a quarter time. So I'm generating in that 1 gig 105.3 megawatt hours of heat. So it's quite a lot. Now, what about her lighting and sound? So because the Eras tour has been a bit of a cultural phenomenon, lots of people have done a lot of the work for me, and someone has gone online and calculated every energy amount she has used per show. And in one of her London shows, she uses 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. So how much of that is being turned to heat? So in lighting, 60% is turned to heat when you're using high-powered LEDs. So I'm making an assumption here that it's high-powered LEDs. And then lighting uses double the energy that sound does. So total heat generated from lighting, it's going to be double the amount from sound, so it's 666,666 reoccurring, times the 60%, which is 4,000 kilowatt hours, or 4 megawatt hours of heat. So altogether, one Wembley show is 109.3 megawatt hours of heat. So that is the equivalent of cutting down and burning 73 oak trees. Now that does give her a bit of a negative connotation. All artists and all gigs generate this amount of heat. They're all chopping down trees equivalent. In fact, Coldplay now does sustainability reports, which you can find online. Interesting read. Some of it's a bit, but it's still a move in the right direction. So let's put this heat into good use. So how much can be reclaimed? So in heat reclaim, you can do between 50 to 80% of the heat that you get from the air to be put to good uses. I've gone for 50% because I think it's good to be conservative. How many shows did Taylor Swift do? She did 8. So if we look at how much heat can be reclaimed from her shows, it's the 109 megawatts times 8 shows and then times 50%. So it's going to be 437 megawatt hours. So we're going to use domestic hot water, and I talked about why not for space heating. We are going to touch on that, but for now we're going to talk about domestic hot water. And domestic hot water is things like your showers, your washing your hands, day-to-day activities. And again, we've gone for 8 kilowatt hours per house per day. This is a conservative estimate. Normally it's about maximum 6, but we've imagined this person likes long showers and clean hands. So let's have a look at how many homes that she could supply domestic hot water to. So for just one show, for 8 kilowatt hours of domestic hot water is 6,831 homes. So it's quite a lot of people, over 6,000 people can shower. In her 8 Wembley shows, she could power 54,000 homes. But again, let's put that into context. How many is that actually? So the London Borough of Brent, where the Wembley Stadium resides, has 127,860 homes. So for her concerts, all 8 together, she could meet 43% of all of the homes in that borough, domestic hot water for one day. And then London itself has 3.8 million homes, so she could meet 1.5% of the whole of London's domestic hot water demand for one day. But can it really though? So the question here is, why has it not been used for space heating? And the reason is because you have 2 types of heat. You have low grade and you have high grade heat. So an ambient loop is a low grade heat. The name is ambient, and that's because it's ambient air temperature. It's between 10 to 30 degrees. So it's great for washing your hands, great for having a shower. However, if you want it for space heating, you have to top it up to make it to high grade heat. And that's when you're going to have that ground source heat exchanger we saw earlier, your heat pumps, your top-up boilers, etc. So that's why it's easier not to use ambient loop for space heating, because you just need an extra step, but you can still use it. Just an extra thing to think about. All the heat that she's generating in that moment might not necessarily be needed at that time. People shower at different times, she's performing at midnight, most people are in bed. So we're probably going to need to integrate it with buffer thermal storage vessels, and they are better because you can take away the peak of something and it makes things a bit cheaper, but also you're going to need to move your fluid around, so you're going to need pumps, and again that is going to require electricity. So let's look at how much electricity Taylor Swift is going to generate. So you can generate kinetic electricity. Coldplay have become really big for it because they've started to put movable dance floors in their concerts and reported on the technology. And it's been around for a long time. I wrote a project at university about this, about turning the whole of Trafalgar Square into these tiles. Interesting, but that one was with a different technology because you've got electromechanical and piezoelectric. They get grouped in the same name during papers and presentations, but they are different. And electromechanical is better, and you get more electricity from standing on it. So let's say we put that tile in, you stand on it, it's picked up by a generator, and it converts motion into electric potential energy, and then that electromagnetic induction, and you've generated some electricity. But how much are we actually going to generate? So on average, each step on one of those tiles creates 2.5 joules of electricity. So it's not huge amounts, but it's better than nothing. So to convert joules to kilowatt hours, you have to divide by 3.6 million. So that's taken into account in the lower calculations. So steps per person per minute. If you're dancing full time, you're going to be doing 110 steps per minute. But as we discussed earlier, some of her songs are more standstill. So I've gone for a half and half medium. I've gone for 55 steps per minute, because half of it you're going to be dancing, half of it you're going to be standing. Concert length is 195 minutes, your 3 hours and your 15. And then your stadium capacity is 90,000. So for your electricity generated per show, you've got your 90,000 times the length, times the steps per minute, times the joules, and then divided to get kilowatt hours. So you've got 670 kilowatt hours. How many over the 8 shows? You just times it by 8, and you've got 5.36 megawatt hours of electricity. But again, let's put that into context. What does that actually mean? So according to Offshore, the average house uses 2,700 kilowatt hours of electricity every year. So from her 8 shows, she could approximately meet the electricity for 2 homes for 1 year. Now, technically it's 1.98 homes, so 2 people would probably need to dance a little bit harder, but it's 2 homes for 1 year. So again, it's important to know that this is an instantaneous energy. It happens all at once and they'll need it for the whole year. So you're going to need to use battery energy storage to allow to smooth it out and let them access it whenever they need. Or if it was instantaneous and everyone wanted to switch their kettle on in one go, over 53,000 homes could have a cup of tea at the same time. And again, if we go back to the borough of Brent earlier, where Wembley resides, that's about 50% of all the homes in that borough could have a cup of tea thanks to her show. Okay, so this song's been stuck in my head for ages since writing this, because it's to do with London and it's to do with Taylor Swift. She's not coming back anytime soon. There's talk of another concert, but it probably won't be to the same scale as the Eras tour. Her shows for the UK economy generated apparently £1 billion, which is pretty impressive. But it's not just Taylor Swift that this applies to, it's all musicians and artists, it's all gigs and shows. Heat is generated, and why aren't we not using it? It's just left to go outside, it's not capitalised on. So it's not just Taylor Swift, it's everybody. And if you want to learn more about waste heat, I'm back tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and I'm looking more at how it's modelled, harnessed. Taylor Swift doesn't appear so much in that one. If you'd like to check any of my references, check my thinking, please take a photo. Challenge me, more than happy, but this is where I've gone to check what I'm talking about from today. Any questions?